Did you get that, Val? That have come out of our working group process. So we took input from all the groups, identified really key themes that are sort of must-haves in our master planning process, and included those in the RFQ, and then asked the firms to respond to those key vision elements in their applications. So it was a big part of our scoring, and we received applications from 12 firms. If you're in the planning world, these would be firms well recognized to all. International profiles, have done some of the top projects around the world over the last several years. But there was kind of a nice mix, along with sort of the big firms. We had a nice boutique firm that is really doing some cutting edge work. Got firms that have local presence, and so it was a nice mix. We put together a selection committee to make a recommendation to our board about the firm that will be selected. It includes a couple of members of our board, Jim Russell and April Cooper, who's also co-chair of this group, Wilf Summercorn, who is kind of the dean of planners in our region, formerly the planning director for Salt Lake City and the regional planning director for Salt Lake County, economic development director for Davis County, and Christina Oliver, who is the community development director for Draper. And then I'm the fifth member of that group. So last week we went through the very challenging exercise of reviewing all of the applications and narrowing it down to 6 firms. We've got 6 that are outstanding. This week we're conducting interviews of those 6 firms. We did 3 yesterday, and we've got 3 tomorrow. And again, we're asking them about the key vision elements that came out of the working group process. By tomorrow night, we'll be narrowed down to 3 finalists. Those finalists will go through stage 2 of our recruitment process. And we're going to give them some information. We're going to give them a detailed scope of work, a lot of information about the site itself. We're going to give them a program of work, essentially the market analysis that's been done and the mix of uses that we think the market can bear at that site. We're also going to give them a copy of the working group report. We want to make sure that they're very much aware of the discussions that we've been having over the last 4 months and are able to refer to those issues and those ideas as they start the planning process. So from here on out, we will, as I said, get 3 finalists by tomorrow night. We'll meet with them all the first week of November. I'll give them some background on the site, the constraints, the opportunities, and everything from environmental to topographical to historical sites, etc. We'll answer any questions they have and then send them off to do some work. And a couple of weeks later, they'll come back, present to us concepts, big ideas, thoughts that they have on the site. We'll respond to them and let them know what we like and don't like and where we think they ought to focus more time. And then early in December, they'll come back, make presentations to the selection committee. We'll then make a recommendation to the board, and the board will select a firm in December. We'll then enter into negotiations, try to get them under contract by the end of the year, and ready to start working on the first part of January, with the goal of having a framework master plan by midsummer. So it's quick time. It's an accelerated time frame, but we think we can get there. And I'll just say, based on the 3 interviews we had yesterday, I'm very confident that we're going to get an outstanding firm that can help us with that master planning process. And then kind of at the end of the meeting today, I'll talk a little bit about next steps and where we're going. But I want you to understand the role that you play in this process. And so I think what we'll do is turn today to the draft report that we put together. Let me see if I can pull this up here. I assume you can see that okay. So let me emphasize, this is very much a draft, and let me talk about its purpose and why we're asking you for feedback on it. I kind of touched on it earlier, but the primary audience for this is our master planning firms, so that they're focusing their ideas and work on those things that our working groups have decided are most important. There's probably a number of other audiences, but not the least of which are members of the public who want to see what the thinking is that's going into our planning. And so I think we'll probably have other eyes taking a look and just seeing what's been discussed. So in doing something like this, there's a bit of a balance. I don't want to provide a transcript of everything that was said. That'd just be a little too detailed. So I wanted to be able to capture the primary concepts that you've identified, the approaches, the priorities, the ideas, etc., in the report itself. Then for anybody that wants to delve into more detail, we've included appendices that include the members of our working groups, and the notes from our meetings. And then for those working groups that developed subgroups that looked at more detail into some items, we've included their recommendations as well. So it's kind of that balance, wanting not to get too detailed, but at least be able to capture what's most important. So maybe I'll walk through this very quickly, show you what's in there. As I mentioned in our transmittal email, I thought that one advantage of getting this out to you is to let you see what some of the other groups have been considering, so you can see a bigger picture, but also see where there are areas of commonality, and I think there are many. Just started off with a description of this site, the potential that it has, why it's important to us, and then talk about the legal structure and the board that we have, the standards and guidelines that we've set out for ourselves. Then go through and provide an overview of the working group process, what the structure is and what your primary tasks are. One was helping us to develop those key vision elements, which has been done. Next is to identify additional ideas that could be included in this report that would be handed to the planning team. Then, as we'll describe in more detail later in the meeting, we would hope that you would be willing to engage with the planning firm during the spring, kind of review at key checkpoints how they're doing, what they're doing, and whether there are kind of course corrections that are needed. And finally, also to help us build relationships with potential target companies, with investors, that this group in particular, that's relevant to. And then kind of champions in the community to help us create the best opportunity for success at this site. Then kind of went through and just described the meetings, what we did at each of the meetings, what happened in between. So those that are reading it can have an understanding of the process. Then really the meat of this is the summaries of the working group conclusions. Now, let me make an admission first. That is, had very little time and have been kind of scrambling to review all of the notes and all of the records that we have of our meetings and try to capture the ideas in major themes. So I haven't had a chance to go through and polish this and turn it into a great work of literature, but I'm focused more right now on the substance and making sure we have the right information captured in here. I'm hoping that I'll have a little bit of time over the weekend and maybe can spend a little more time on that polishing side. I captured the ideas of the stakeholder working group. Those were elected officials that represent local communities. The Education, Research, and Innovation group, again, captured general themes that they suggested. Our Environment and Air Quality Working Group. And this morning, we met with the Infrastructure and Land Use Working Group, and they had some refinements to these descriptions and asked me to add a few ideas in there. And so I'll be working on that task in the next few days. And then, of course, I mentioned the appendices at the end, but this is the heart of today's discussion. Maybe what I'll do is just kind of very quickly go through what's here. It's just, kind of a page and a half or so. And then after I go through the whole thing briefly, we can go back and kind of concept by concept, see what I'm missing, what needs to be characterized better, make sure that it's reflecting your wishes as a group. So if that's all right, I'll just kind of go through this. And I said that the emphasis here was helping us create a center of economic activity, a place that can catalyze statewide growth, and recognizing that this is a significant opportunity for us, not just locally, but beyond. Kind of captured ideas that you shared regarding the vision for this area. Part of it is placemaking, creating an attractive community that's got a great lifestyle, people can live, work, and play, mixed use, transit served, technology focused, sustainable practices, arts, open space, recreation, etc. We also talked about an innovation center, a place where Utah's startup companies can get a leg up, where we can take research and ideas and commercialize them and turn them into real companies. We also mentioned the need to coordinate along and complement work being done on other major strategic economic development projects in the state. Then talked about a recruitment strategy. As we discussed at the last meeting, we wanted to build that on our regional strengths, coordinating with broader efforts. Part of it is attracting high-profile anchors to the site. I think your direction appropriately was we should be pursuing those anchors at the same time we're doing master planning, rather than waiting for a master plan to be in place, because they can help us identify what attributes make the site more appealing. And also it takes a little bit of time to get on their agendas for potentially locating here. You mentioned we're going to seek not just any company, but we want companies and that are real partners that buy into our vision, that fit with Utah, that want to contribute to our communities, local as well as global firms. And that we've got some contacts in this group and others that can help us identify key people in target companies. We also talked a little bit about the kinds of sectors that maybe we want to focus on. We've probably got, it's a little overbroad at this point, but that's the way it should be. We can start narrowing that down, but various clusters that we heard from EDCU, as well as some of you. But we've got aerospace and defense, energy, financial services, information technology, healthcare innovation, advanced materials and manufacturing. And then we also heard cybersecurity, robotics, AI, data centers. One of the things we talked about a little bit was our regional strengths. What are the things that...
Hey, Alan.
Yeah.
Alan, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think one point that we made related to recruiting and to having global leaders in the center is that they could also help potentially with the design and bring their technology and their experience from other centers. I don't know if that comes up later, but it seems like it should be in here and maybe right there where you just finished.
Yeah, and I'll go back. I did try to capture that, maybe not as well as you did, but yeah, we'll go back paragraph by paragraph and see what we've missed. But I wanted us to see the big picture before diving down a little bit.
All right, fair enough.
No, that's great input, and I agree with you fully. So let's just kind of outlines a few of the things that set us apart. Fast-growing economy, government policies, business climate, infrastructure, Silicon Slopes, venture capital sector, the beauty and livability of our area, educated educated workforce, and more. So we can talk about that. And then we talked about a few ideas that could help us strengthen Utah's position generally, and our opportunities to recruit firms to this site in particular. So, working on a workforce pipeline, including improving K-12 higher education at this site, emphasizing workforce diversity, bringing in well-known K-12 education providers. Again, that's helping with the workforce, but also attracting corporate executives who want their kids to get a great education. We talked about improving or streamlining approval processes and seeing if we can streamline regulation to help advance innovation as best we can. And we discussed some centers of excellence. And finally, with respect to investment, there wasn't a lot of discussion on this, but we talked about the fact that if we can get major companies coming in here and showing an interest, that their investment and other investment will follow. We've got members of this working group and others that have good relationships with potential investors, and we want to take advantage of that. So that's kind of the big picture. And again, it's just based on what I recorded from the meetings, what our staff recorded from the meetings, and the reviews that we've done. So I'm sure that there are things that are missed or could be stated better. And this is our opportunity to do that, recognizing the challenges of editing by committee. So we're not going to go through and wordsmith, but I want to make sure that we're capturing the right ideas. Maybe we ought to start with this first paragraph, vision for the point, and I'll kind of keep it here so you can read through it if you haven't had a chance to read it yet, and share any thoughts you have on kind of the big picture vision for this area.
Alan, this is Derek Miller. I just wanted to say well done to you and the team that put this document together. I feel like it really more than adequately captures the myriad discussions that have been held over a long period of time, which is not easy to do. It's easy to talk, but it's hard to write. So well done to you and your team.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So any any thoughts on this vision statement? And again, this isn't the last opportunity. If something comes to mind, you can always send me an email or text, but I am going to try to get this drafted by the end of the weekend, and so we can include it in the packets. Okay, I'm not hearing anything on the vision for the point. Let's turn to recruitment strategy here. Thoughts or input? Did we get the right, one specific question, did we get the right clusters or industry sectors?
I think you did.
Okay.
Looks pretty good, Alan.
Okay. Making it too easy on me. Yeah, the regional strengths, obviously, this is something that could go on, and there are probably plenty more we could add, but
Alan,
yes.
a quick question back on the recruitment strategies. I do think you caught the industry clusters. Is there a sentence or two in there with respect to the education innovation center and recruiting efforts there? Or are you handling that in the separate working group that focuses on that? By the way, I kind of read this for things I thought were missing and found none on the first read. It looked complete. But now I'm looking for those two or three things that the recruiting strategy I thought may have to include a whole lot with respect to education, innovation, and maybe a statement consistent with Val's thought of state funding in that area too.
Yeah, I like that. Give me a little bit more on that. What do you think a sentence would essentially say? Is it just
a concept that would say the recruiting strategy, in addition to the industries, will also have a separate component with respect to an education element,
okay?
a higher education element.
Yeah.
You know, I remember one comment about a Pac-12 research center.
Yeah, exactly. Let me just make a few notes. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and we do have some of that in the innovation group, but the overlap is important. I think it shows that these aren't clear silos, that there is overlap among them. So that's a great point. I love it. Okay. Regional strengths. Is that okay as is? Again, I'll go through and do some wordsmithing and polish it up a little bit, but all right, then ideas to strengthen Utah's position. And maybe the thing to do is, instead of Utah's position, is really ideas to strengthen our position at the point. We're not trying to solve all of the state's issues, but we get it. Anything you might add to that?
Alan, I
I
really
you know,
like this.
Go ahead, Teresa.
Oh, thanks, David. The one thing I know this section specifically talks about a workforce pipeline. But since you've mentioned in here K through 12 education providers, we're missing another piece of something that's really important to working parents, and that is just early childhood education and child care generally. I would love to see, like some sort of an innovative co-op between the firms that are located at the point where they invest in some sort of child development center or childcare, where parents who work at the point have really world-class childcare options, which is a big actually impediment to our growth, and which has certainly been felt even more acutely with the pandemic, as childcare centers some have closed temporarily, some have not reopened, and this is a big constraint. So I wouldn't have necessarily included it in here, but just since you mentioned K through 12, I might just say something about early childhood and daycare centers, or just something of the sort.
Teresa, I'm so glad that you raised that. Actually, one of the very first meetings I had when I got this job was a group that came in to talk about putting childcare facilities at the site and trying to set up the co-op that you just described. So that's something that we shouldn't forget, because I do recognize that as an impediment to getting some people to work here and being as productive as possible. So that's a good addition.
I think that's really innovative and could be a real draw as we look to recruit. If you see what Qualtrics, with their big announcement that they made last year, that was part of it. They were going to build a really cool daycare / early childhood education facility right across the street to benefit the employees. So that's a great idea, Teresa.
Yeah.
Alan, I fully second that. I was going to say, maybe it's more of a housekeeping point, but the list of segments here for the centers of excellence are different from the ones in the recruitment strategy. And the ones in the recruitment strategy actually were a little more specific at the end and seemed more like ones that might feature in a center of excellence, like around cybersecurity or robotics or artificial intelligence. So I don't know if you want to add them or substitute, but I think those are a little more granular and maybe something you could really have excellence on.
Yeah, that's really a good point. And I think they showed up in this way because these are ones we talked about when we used the language centers of excellence, but it really does make sense that we're consistent when we're talking about the clusters that we're targeting and the centers of excellence. So I think that's a great suggestion, David, and I'll make those consistent. Okay, and got that investment piece. There's not a lot in it, but we didn't spend a lot of time talking about that. And in part, that's because the investment will follow to some extent, the planning and some of the recruitment and some of the next steps that we have to take. So I think that'll be the topic of greater focus in the future. But anything that we should add at this point?
Alan, is that a place to add any language about the state's investment in business recruiting? Our commitment to GoEd's activities, the state's partnership that could play out in this area.
Yeah, no, that's a good thought. I'll tell you that there is a little sensitivity in that because we've had several state leaders say, we think that this could be an appealing enough place that we won't have to provide economic incentives, and those might be better used elsewhere. But if we recognize that there's some politics behind all of that, maybe I can finesse it a bit.
Teresa, what do you think? How many sites on their own are so appealing that a state never has to play?
You know, I love the idealism and optimism around creating something that is so attractive that in and of itself is an incentive. You know, I think we've benchmarked and been provided with some information from RCLCO on the other sites that this is sort of comparable to, or that we might model to. I'd imagine those other sites probably have some form of extra inducement as well. I'd be keen on doing that research or that analysis to see if any of these other, you know, sort of comparable or model sites have been able to modify or eliminate incentives. My guess is they probably have, again, some sort of an additional inducement that's available, but I haven't looked into it specifically.
Teresa, meaning something above and beyond the state's usual statutory plan?
Sorry, Lloyd, thanks for letting me clarify. I meant meaning something above and beyond the placemaking that will occur here, and the infrastructure and the assets that are intended to be built at the point.
And just to be clear, I'm not naive enough to think that, you know, we build this and everybody knocks on the door thinking it's perfect. I'm just sensitive to the politics behind incentives at this point. And, you know, some will say the incentives are the money that's going into building the infrastructure, and some of the placemaking, et cetera. So I'm not discounting that. I'm just highlighting the political issue.
Alan, this is Val. I think, you know, people like to say that possibly they would come without incentives, and some might, but the really, really good projects that are extremely competitive, the type that we would love to have in our Point of the Mountain facility there, or land there, those usually are very competitive, and I don't think they would come without some sort of an incentive. Now, whether that incentive is the EdTIF and that would suffice, or whether they would even want something beyond that, I don't know. But the really good projects, you can almost guarantee that they would require an incentive to come, because everybody wants them and they're all competing.
Yeah, I'm sure that's right. And they've got a lot dangled in front of them. But, okay.
Unique to this project, though, is the 700 acres itself. I don't know if there's a right point to make sure that a planner knows that, or to have the state's political thinkers establish the value of the land. But land is a pretty good incentive right there, primarily located the way this is. So those two may be, I don't know, Alan, when's the right time to start working the political process to help legislative and other bodies know what it may take to land the really big fish that you want to put here?
You know, my sense is that it's probably not too far away. And, you know, we're doing a little outreach now. I think we're going to start getting more serious about recruitment and outreach to key firms at the beginning of next year. My guess is that we'll probably hear from some of them saying, nice opportunity, we're interested, share with us your incentive package. And then when we've got specific requests like that, it'll make it a little easier to go to the legislature and political leaders and others and say, here's the reality of what we're hearing. Now, those are good thoughts. And yes, the land is definitely a potential incentive. I'll just share with you a little bit of a challenge that we're going to be dealing with, and we've started talking about with our board. And that is that members of the legislature and others are starting to look at this site as a way to fund all of their pet projects. So you won't be surprised to hear that some are saying, we were promised this site would pay for X. And, a call last week from someone saying a legislator told me we could sell some of the land on this site to pay for Y. And others, the statute that creates this says we need to build in quality of life and placemaking and social benefits. That costs money. It doesn't just happen. And of course, expectation that site will pay for its own infrastructure and feed local coffers. And my point is, we can't be all things to all people. We can't fund everybody's project on and off site. And so we're going to have to be a little bit careful in some of the promises we make up front. And I think you're all aware of that, but we're kind of getting to the time where we're going past the big vision and the fun part of thinking big dreams to having to get down to doing some math. And we've got our consultants doing that right now. So we'll be kind of getting a pretty good idea of the value of the site. We can start working scenarios that'll help us understand the cost of building the infrastructure. And a lot of that will be coming out of this planning process. I know you know all that. So anything else before we wrap this up?
Hey, Alan, this is Mike Flynn. Going back to the incentive conversation, I would perhaps argue that the incentive should be thought of as a feature of the site. So you're not going out to companies pitching the site and then waiting to have a negotiation. But when you go out and pitch the site, you pitch it with the incentive defined. I think that does two things. I think it makes it look a little more real, and I also think it helps set whatever expectation is reasonable at the outset. I think if you go in with that undefined, the answer is going to be, well, we want everything. And that's maybe where you run into some trouble. So I think the more definition that could be put around that at the outset, the better it's going to be in the long run.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, I'm going to be counting a lot on you and GoEd on that piece of it. We're going to rely on many of you on the recruitment piece, and we'll be trying to build a site that'll be appropriately appealing.
If I could, just to enhance the comment that Michael said, this is Joseph Spence. A lot of times, like, for example, some of the standard incentives as we think around, those sometimes aren't the things that are the most important to a lot of the companies that we may want to court here. They'll certainly take it, right, for sure. But even then, sometimes our ability to create, like, say, if it's post-performance tax incentives, et cetera, and so forth, things like that, compared to some other states, it may not come in, significantly above them. Right. So competing purely on some of the standard types of incentives, you can do that, but I don't think it will necessarily result in a super win in the way that I think is really possible to do here. There are a number of other types of incentives that at least we can, per experience, we can anticipate people are going to want. And I think we could lean in on those things in advance. And then again, to Michael's point, but then, to your point, Alan, as well, you certainly want to have it be a conversation and be able to accept feedback and thoughts from people when you've met them. Right. But we do know that I can list out for you for sure. There are certain things that matter a lot more to people than the incentives. Right. And we've discussed some of those things, and some of them are deeply embedded and are embedded in the document here. It's the things around education, like I said, that might seem like a minor thing, but you actually talk to the companies and the executives about why they either went to a place and or why they left. That is a big one. Two, particularly around the technology companies, to the degree we have built in, like I said, built in unique infrastructure into the land and into the roads and to the way that this thing operates. Again, incredible incentive These are things, I mean, we could take them, there's a whole list of them, but these are things that we can know in advance to put on the table and just to highlight, to make it incredibly attractive to people to really engage seriously this process. So I just, want to reiterate those points to help, because in many cases, like I said, some of the more standard incentives, they should be there, but they're not going to be the thing that differentiates the state the most from some from competitors. And even then, they won't necessarily be like the main decision-making factor for a lot of the people that we want to approach.
Yeah, thank you, Joseph. Appreciate that point. It's well made. Okay. Last opportunity. Anything more on any of these points you want to add? Okay. Maybe let me take a minute. Go ahead.
Sorry about that, Alan. Maybe one thing I wanted to add that maybe I might have alluded to in previous comments, but which is even more of a defined thing now, the ability to really take this thing and put it on, if you all agree and on the same page, right, to really put this on the global stage is there, right? The ability to convene, a global group of investors, a global group of thought leaders around really what I think is a magical opportunity here is possible, and to build very tight relationships with some of these larger bodies is also on the table. So like I've curated a number of exclusive gatherings with, a who's who's list, both at the United Nations, at the World Economic Forum, and oftentimes, I actually even get asked to provide content and do things on these platforms at no cost to myself, and actually even get paid to do so. So, one of the things which I think is possible is to really look at the narratives here that we are really looking to uplift, and then fashion something. Like I think what's really in vogue now, having smart infrastructure is deeply in vogue globally. Not just smart infrastructure for infrastructure's sake, but for key items that enhances the lives of individuals and families and community, and kind of a symbiotic relationship with the environment. And to the degree those are principles that we are in agreement with, there's a wonderful active opportunity to put this in front of some of the largest families, the largest organizations on the planet. And so I just, again, want to leave you with that thought. To chew on.
If I can add something to that, there's an article in Inc. magazine, was just published 2 days ago. It's AOL co-founder Steve Case predicts the cities and industries that could create the next Silicon Valley. When I see these headlines come up, I always read them because I want to see if Salt Lake City is on the list. And the bad news is that we're not on his list. And I frequently see that we're not. Now, we live here in Utah, and so we have a sense of what the possibility and the opportunities here are. But I think it's really important what Joseph is saying is that we really need to take advantage of opportunities to take what we're doing and put it on a world stage so that more people can learn about these opportunities. And if we don't take advantage of that world stage and accessing it and getting the word out there, we're still a fairly small city, compared to others. The ones that made this list are much, much larger cities than we are. And so we need to take advantage of opportunities like Joseph's talking about to get the word out about what the opportunities are here in Salt Lake and to talk about them in a way that really is effective at showing that we can be leaders in a number of different industries that we have identified in the report.
Indeed. To illustrate that, just to illustrate it, like a little under 2 weeks ago, I had a wonderful call with Jean-Paul DeJoria. Now, some of you may know him as, the guy that was the founder of Patron I know it's an interesting comment to have that here in Utah, but interesting enough, I mean, beyond being fabulously wealthy, he also happens to be very interested in smart cities and sustainable development, essentially. Deeply interested in it, and has set aside a significant amount of his wealth and capital to do projects like that. They just launched a major initiative in India, and a few other states here in the United States, actually. So, being able to think about fielding conversations with people like that and doing it in the right way, positioning the state, positioning the narrative to really catch people like that who would not have thought about Utah to come here and do something like that, but having known about it and having been presented to them properly, would.
Yeah, well said. Good points.
To add to that discussion a little bit, or I think your point that Utah doesn't hit the global stage in a impressive way is well said. Opposite is, I do think that, and maybe I'm in my bubble, but I certainly listen coast to coast to what happens. I think we hit the national stage in a pretty good way. I'm trying to get ready for Monday's summit and pulled down PwC's real estate investment. In fact, what do they call it? The Emerging Trends in Real Estate for 2021. It's a report that PwC publishes about October of each year, and it came out, I think, just a week or so ago. I was pleased to see, and I'll spend a little bit of time on it Monday, top 10 cities for real estate investment. The only one west of Texas, the only one really in the whole Western U.S., and number 7 on the list, and we've been as high as 3 and 4 on the list in previous years, but number 7 this year is Salt Lake. That's a good nationally circulated piece that gets good respect in the investment community, maybe not the day-to-day business development community, but the investment community. It's good to see Salt Lake there. So point well made. How do we leapfrog into the global type of environment? But I am always pleased to see where we hit on the national, and particularly the Western states. And beating Phoenix, beating Denver, beating all of those is a good place for real estate investment. Is a good starting point for us. Now maybe it only takes us as far as Kansas, but it's a good start.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a tremendous opportunity here, and we do see frequently examples where Utah might even be ranked 1 or 2 in terms of economic opportunity. I just don't think we should take it for granted. There are more opportunities. Yeah.
And one of the biggest opportunities there, both between Lloyd and Thor, to your comments, packaging what we do know is great, and then what the rest of the world or the nation even doesn't know that's really great. Curating that information and putting it in the right platform is the opportunity that's really right in front of us. That can happen relatively easy. And so, I'm a deep believer in the state. I remember I moved here maybe about 6.5 years ago. But especially over the last 2 years, I've just seen the right narrative pieces here that are just right. And it can really be a tipping point to leverage on those narratives to break into a global audience and readjust some of those stats that we were just talking about. So in some cases, we'll see number 1, number 2, top 5 in key areas. But if you want to break into the national scales and break into other areas, I think the time is ripe to be able to do that. And that's a narrative that's sitting right here in front of us to collate and put in front of the right audiences to adjust those stats.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate all those thoughts. And I think those are really important and provide some broader context for what we're trying to do here. And, this is a 700-acre site, and some of the things we're talking about go far beyond that. But I think that we can serve as a bit of a catalyst for accomplishing some of these things. Let me just kind of wrap up and share with you where we go from here with respect to your involvement. So as we said, this will be the last meeting of the working group this year. We're not going to try to meet the last week of November or the last week of December, because you wouldn't be here anyway. So take the rest of the year off. But we've set out a scope of work for the planning team. And in general, it's going to have kind of 4 phases. We'll have one that's information data gathering and putting the pieces together. We'll have a section that'll be working on developing scenarios for the site. Another one that'll be evaluating those scenarios and kind of narrowing down to a preferred alternative. And then finally, developing the framework master plan and the kind of the guidance, the guideline document that will direct the standards of development into the future. At the end of each of those 4 sections, we're going to bring you together with the planners and let you provide some feedback on what you're hearing, whether they're heading in the right direction, whether there are some changes that we need to make. And so I know that all of you are incredibly busy, but if you have some time when we hit those dates, we'll get those to you in advance. We would welcome your participation, probably bring in some other stakeholders from the community. At the right point, we'll be involving the broader community in providing some input into scenarios that are developed. But again, want to make sure that what comes out at the end of this pipeline is a visionary Utah product, something that we can feel good about and reflects our values. So that's where we're heading. We hope that you would be willing to give us a little bit more of your time in responding to the drafts that come out. Any questions about that at all? Okay, more to come. We'll send you the dates on those and see if you're able to participate. Before I turn things back to Val, let me just say inadequately how much I appreciate all that you've done. To this point, you've provided remarkable expertise, big picture thought. You've represented your professions, you've represented the community well, and really brought some expertise to this project, certainly that I don't have. And as a result, our planning process is going to be more informed and more directed. And the product at the end of the day is going to be a lot better. So your stamp is very much on it. And as I said, I can't adequately say thanks, but thanks very much. Val?
Well, thanks, Alan. As I mentioned before, the work that's being done on this at a pretty rapid pace is remarkable, and we appreciate everyone's weighing in on it. We have a tremendous opportunity ahead of us here. It really is amazing as we look at that piece of property and where it is and the potential. And the fact that we have to do it right the first time is a little bit daunting, but I'm sure we'll get it right and it'll be fantastic. So thanks, everyone. And gosh, I guess, Alan, if we aren't meeting again till after Christmas, some of you we won't see till the new year. So everybody have a great November and December, and let's hope that 2020 passes away and we can put it in, way back in the back of our minds and move on to 2021.
Amen.
Amen. And with that, pleasure seeing all of you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Val.
Thanks, everyone.